Hey, Milwaukee Mafia Patreon members. Welcome back. I'm Eric Walterkins.
I'm Gavin Schmitt.
And Gavin, we've got another question for you, hot off the presses.
Nice.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I love mailbag is my favorite.
Mailbagging it today. And the question is, dun, 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 when requesting records, what agency is the best to work with and which is the worst? And I think to preface this question, why don't you first talk about what agencies do you commonly request records from?
Sure. I would say that the one that I deal with the most is the FBI, but also the Milwaukee Police Department, various other police departments. Every city, county has their own jurisdiction, so, there's several out there. But then there's others. There's the Secret Service, because they do the counterfeiting thing, for those who remember way back to counterfeiting, Secret Service. The DEA, of course, IRS, CIA is extremely rare, but it's happened. The National Archives, dealt with them. The State Historical Society, pretty much anywhere there's a record. There's records all over the place. And sometimes they're obvious and sometimes they're not. So they all have varying degrees of good and bad. I'll start with the bad. How about that?
Okay.
By far the worst is the IRS.
That does not surprise me whatsoever.
The IRS will not give you pretty much anything. And I don't know if I've ever dealt with them directly, but sometimes an FBI file will have IRS information in it because they'll request information. The IRS will give the FBI the information, but then you'll get an FBI file and it's got like a page missing and it says, oh, this page we have to consult with the IRS. And this is built in, like if you do an FBI request, any agency that they have to consult with, they'll send you that later when they get back that information. So a lot of these guys, they look into them for tax problems. And so the IRS comes up frequently. And I will tell you, every single time, without exception, when the IRS sends you the missing pages, it's just a big white square. That's it.
Really?
Yeah. They won't even acknowledge the person's name. It's like, we have removed everything. No name, no date, nothing.
I guess my question is, disclaimer that you are not a lawyer and you do not know.
I am not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer.
Inside and out. But from the understanding that is the information that they're withholding, is that supposed to be public record?
I'm on the fence about it. There's things that are public record that have a higher standard. Financial records is one of them. Medical records is another. But there's also the generally accepted idea that once you are a dead person, you have no right to privacy. So it's hard to say. I think they're more thorough and more secretive than they need to be, but they're not completely off base either. For the people who listen to the Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem podcast, when we did the Appleton Butcher case, the Appleton Police Department gave me that file, but they still blanked out the names of the medications that the lady was taking. And I don't think they had to do that. She's very deceased. She's been deceased for 50 years. But it's just natural that medical information is nothing that gets released. So they blanked it out. And I don't hold that against them. I mean, it wasn't crucially important, so it's fine with me. But yeah, medical and finances are things that they're a higher bar. So I think the IRS is probably wrong. I think if they were challenged, they could potentially be overruled, but it's not really worth the trouble to do it.
So, and you talked about, you get an FBI file, the file comes through.
Yeah.
And then that file will reference an IRS document. I didn't really understand how this worked. Now, do you go back to the IRS and request that file?
I don't.
Or the FBI says, okay, we've sent a request to get this file for you from the IRS?
Correct.
And then basically the IRS just sends you a blank piece of paper.
Yes. Yes. When you get an FBI file, the first page that you get says to you how many pages they looked at and how many pages they're giving you out of the pages they looked at. So you know how many pages they just aren't going to give you at all. And then underneath that, if there was anything in there that came from what they call OGA, which is Other Government Agency, because for whatever reason, everything is an abbreviation in the government. So instead of just saying it comes from another government agency, they say these files are OGA.
That's how the government is so effective at everything.
Yeah.
It's because they shorten everything down.
So they'll say this is how many pages are OGA. Then it'll say, 2 pages from IRS. And they say, we have sent this to them and they will consult with you directly when they complete their search or whatever. And yeah, without fail, it's blank. And other places are much better. Like if they forward it on to like the Bureau of Prisons, like someone's like part of the prison record is in an FBI file, that you usually get. So most of these other places that the FBI is getting information from, you end up getting. But the IRS, you just never do.
So have you ever gotten anything besides a blank piece of paper from the IRS, essentially?
No.
Okay.
No, the only time I've ever gotten anything is if I got it from the FBI, and it's because the person missed it. Because more often than not, they're overly thorough, and they blank things that shouldn't be blank. But you get the rare occasion where there's things where they accidentally missed that page. So you get things that you're probably not supposed to get. So I've seen, like, on rare occasions, I've seen people's tax returns, but it's pretty rare because you only get it if they accidentally do it.
I guess I've never really thought about how this works, but okay, you get an FBI file in, there's stuff blanked out.
Yeah.
So when you request that file, do they pull the file and then there's some poor guy that has to sit there and read through it and block out the stuff that they feel shouldn't be?
Yeah, so there's a room of people in Virginia, and they're called analysts, and the analysts go through and they do the job. And then there's a supervisor who goes through and like skims it to make sure they did their job, and then you get it.
Interesting.
And the fun thing is if you're like really annoying, then you get to know some of the analysts. Because you reach this stage, they've got this thing called Vexum Filer. That's another great term the FBI has, is the Vexum Filer. If you make too many requests where you start creating a backlog for them, they put you on this list called the Vexum Filer list, and then they assign somebody to like be your case agent, and that person will call you up. So you get to like know this person, and they'll be like, okay, you've got this, this, and this. How can I work with you so we can get this moving? And essentially their job is to like try to talk you out of things. Like be like, oh, we see you've got these requests in. Can we get you to not take any of these? Because they want to get things moving. Not that they care one way or the other. Like if you say, no, I want it, they don't get like mad about it. But they're kind of there to kind of move things along a little bit. So it's fun. You get to talk to them. And I've talked to the same lady for 6 years now. So like, we don't know each other, but we know each other to the point where like, we know how the conversation's going to go.
You request an FBI file.
Yeah.
Right. It goes to one of these people, they block out whatever, they send it to you.
Yeah.
Now, if I request a month later, if I request the same file,
yes,
are they going to pull the full file and send it back through? Okay, so they keep the file.
They do.
They only have to do it once to each document.
They only do it once. Do it once. And if you request something, and if it's ever been requested before, they just send you the previous version, and they tell you that. Yeah. Like the letter will say, these are the pre-processed documents. And if it's been long enough, and I don't know what the time frame is, like if say it's been 5 years or something, then you can send it back. Well, not physically send it back, but you can reply back and be like, could you reprocess this? And they'll do it. They won't do it at like a month later or a year later. They'll be like, you get what you get.
Oh, I see. So like, because if 5 years later there's going to be more people dead or something, right, so that they can unblock some of the names or whatever.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So if I've made a request and I get a pre-processed file, and more often than not, I don't get pre-processed files because most of the people I've looked into, no one's looked into before, but it happens occasionally. And then you can kind of tell, if you're familiar enough where you've read so many of these, which I have, you can tell when they're kind of out of date. Mm-hmm. Because you'll start to see sections that you can tell from the context clues what might be there. And then okay, well, that shouldn't probably be blocked anymore. It's a whole thing. Because if, say, 2 people commit a crime, right? And you get the FBI file on the first guy and you get the FBI file on the second guy, it's not like they're 2 entirely different things. When they talk about that incident, it's going to be practically cut and paste. Mm-hmm. So when you see it the first time and it's like not blanked out, and you see it the second time and it is blanked out, you know that somebody was overdoing their job, because you can tell exactly what's going to be underneath that blank spot because the files aren't identical, but that particular section is going to be the same.
Very similar.
Yeah. So you start to learn when things need a better process.
Okay, so we went off on a tangent. So
a little
do you
bit.
Remember the question that?
Yeah, who's good to work with and who's not? Worst, IRS by far. Second, I would say CIA, although I'm very limited in my experience. But the CIA has this fantastic thing that they're allowed to do that other agencies aren't allowed to do, which is called the GLOMAR response. The GLOMAR response, they can send you a letter that says, we can neither confirm nor deny that we have what you're looking for. Other agencies can't do that. Other agencies either have to say they have it or say they don't have it. They might not give it to you, but they at least have to admit they have it.
Okay.
The CIA has a special rule where they can send a letter saying, we might have it or we might not have it. We're not going to tell you.
But you have gotten documents from the CIA.
I have. It's very rare because it's not really the area that I work in, but yeah.
Because it just seems to me like with that kind of flexibility, they would just tell you that they don't have it.
A lot of times they do.
Or, they would just say, we can neither confirm nor deny this,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, and I think they do that a lot. I have absolutely nothing to do with, like, UFOs and, like, X-File type stuff. But some people, that's, like, the stuff they love. Mm. There's some people that, like, are making requests all the time about the weird stuff. So they're more familiar with that, where they're going to get these responses, where it's like, oh, does the CIA know if we're training people to use, telekinesis and ESP? I don't care one way or the other. That's not my area of research. But let's say that we are training special soldiers to use ESP for spying. Well, they can't admit that. Mm. So they send this letter being like, we don't know. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. The CIA gets special power to do that.
Interesting.
They've got very broad national security powers, whereas the FBI generally doesn't have that.
You said that most other agencies have to say you either have it or don't have it.
Right.
But they don't necessarily have to give it to you.
Right.
Right. What instances do they not have to give it to you?
I can give you a specific example. I don't know what the line is, but there was a case in Chicago, I believe in 2007, that was called the Family Secrets Trial.
Okay.
And it was a number of Chicago Mafia guys who went on trial all at once. And then there was rumor that there was going to be a Family Secrets 2, that they were going to do another round of this, which to this day, now it's 14 years later, they haven't done it, so it's probably not going to happen. But there were certain files that if you requested, they would not give you because they said this is part of an ongoing investigation thing.
Okay, even
though the guy that you requested it on is dead, mm-hmm. They still wouldn't give it to you because apparently whatever was in there, they were going to bring it up at a future trial potentially. Because even though that guy was dead, he might have been working with another guy. And then if they made that public, then that guy would know what they knew and, that whole thing. So that's the only time I've ever had them send me, and I've got a few of those. It was all Chicago related stuff, so I'm pretty sure it was all the same kind of thing. That's the only time I can think of where they were explicitly like, yeah, we have these records, but we can't give them to you. Otherwise, they'll give them to you, they'll blank things out, but they'll at least give you the general file.
Do you feel like when you've requested files that you've gotten what you've asked for, there's not a lot of pulling teeth to get document from these places?
Well, it would vary place by place, but the FBI being the one I'm most familiar with, they're very good about it.
They are.
When I started, there was an email, and that's all you would do is you would send them an email and say, this is what I'm looking for. You'd have to be kind of specific so they knew, and then they would start processing it for you. Apparently, people started using this email, and they were like, okay, well, you have to come up with a better system. I don't know, but at one point in time, it went from like there weren't very many people requesting things where now a lot of people request things, and I don't know what changed, but at some point it kind of took off. So now they have like an actual form on their website. You feel it's not a pain in the butt or anything, but you at least have to go through, and if you're requesting a person, you have to like know their date of birth and things like that. So they know who they're looking for by the time they get the request because they're asking enough identifying details. And in my case specifically, usually I can even identify it more than that because I usually request as soon as I know what somebody's actual file number is. So I can be like, I'm looking for this person. By the way, their file number is this. It's 92-MW-389. And then they're like, oh, okay. And they can find that instantly then because that's how things are categorized. I have no idea who 92-MW-389. That's a random number. I can tell you it's a Milwaukee person and they're in the mob because it's a 92 code, but I don't remember who 389 is. I don't have them all memorized.
Okay, so talk about what are some of the good places?
Some of the good ones to work with. Well, in my case, by far the best is the Wisconsin Historical Society. Obviously, that's not going to apply to people who aren't working in Wisconsin. I get that. But to me, they're fantastic. The guy who previously ran it maybe 10 years ago, him and I had some troubles. And we ended up getting in a fight. And it was fine. Whatever. But since then, there's a new guy who runs it. His name is Lee, and Lee is fantastic. His position is that things that are public record should be public record. They should be out there in the public.
And that is the person that should be running a historical society.
Right, right. I am 100% in agreement with his position on things. If you go in there and you want something, somebody will run down to the basement and they'll pull the box for you. And he'll let you look. There's some restrictions on some things. Again, there's like medical restrictions. Like the big thing that I get from Wisconsin Historical is they have the state prison records. If they have medical stuff in there, they don't want you taking photos or copies of the medical stuff. Like, they're fantastic. The prison records, there's parole records. The parole records are complete. Anybody who's ever applied for parole, the record is there. There was a professor who went through in the 1930s and was going around interviewing guys in the prison system. I don't know exactly what he was trying to accomplish. He was a sociology professor, and he would interview guys, and he would encourage them to write, like, autobiographies. This collection of records is not obvious. Like, if you look up stuff like, oh, crimes, prison, whatever, like, it won't come up in the index that way. You have to find it kind of a roundabout way because it's under, like, the sociology stuff. But it's weird because when I found this, I haven't even looked through most of it, but I was looking through, like, the box of bank robbers because this guy had divided up his interviews based on what crime you were in there for. And so I looked in, like, the bank robber box, and, like, one guy, I don't remember his name, but one guy, like, wrote, like, 90 pages of his autobiography.
Nice.
So, untapped resource there for people who want to write crime stories about Wisconsin history. I mean, that sociology collection,
I mean, that's gold mine.
Yeah, it's gold mine. Some of those guys have already written their own story. You just have to take it out of there. A lot of really good stuff in files you wouldn't expect it to be in because they're not listed as crime. They're just guys who happen to be criminals they have a record for some other reason. State Historical Society, fantastic. Absolutely wonderful.
Now I'm kind of curious. Can you talk about, is the Milwaukee Police Department very good at it?
The Milwaukee Police Department, in my experience, has been overly helpful.
Interesting.
It's probably not what you expected, but...
Well, I do have an experience where I requested something from the Appleton Police Department.
Yeah.
And I was shocked at how quickly it got to me.
Yeah.
Because when I requested it, I assumed I would probably have to call back 3 times. and
Yeah.
But it came very quickly, and it was a lot more than I actually requested. Because I requested like a small piece of a file.
Yeah.
And they sent me the entire file.
Yeah, Appleton's not too bad. I mean, they've got... If you go to, like, the counter there, they've got a form you fill out, and you hand them the form, and it might take them 2 days or something, but they usually have a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I've had things that took a little longer because they were really old that they had to, like, find, so that's fine. But Milwaukee was great. There was a person, I don't know if she's still there, there was a person named Laura, and Laura was kind of like in charge of the records division or whatever. I requested, like, these old homicide files, from the 30s to the 50s. And she was really great about it. I mean, they gave me everything. Every record, every page, every interview, every mugshot. And yeah, I mean, like, the one file I always say, like, it was like 1,400 pages. Like, it was a massive file. And they gave it to me. So they were pretty cool. And most of the other places have been pretty cool. Kenosha was cool. Peoria in Illinois was really cool. Chicago Police Department, they suck.
So do you think Chicago is just because Chicago is so big and they're probably getting so many more
Maybe.
requests?
They suck ass. And I'm sorry for saying ass on this Patreon, but they suck ass. So this is the thing. When I was putting together the second Milwaukee Mafia book, the one with the white cover, the actual book, not the photos. There's a story of like two guys who were like bootleggers, and they went down to Chicago and they got killed in Chicago.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I'll see if they have this file. And I didn't expect them to have it because I'm like, this is 1920s. They probably shredded that a long time ago. But I requested it because I'm like, I'm going to be thorough. I'm going to see what I can do. And they had it. And they said, yeah, we have this, and we're not going to give it to you. and I'm like, okay, why? And they're like, it's an ongoing investigation. And I'm like, excuse me? And they're like, oh, the case was never solved. It's an ongoing investigation. And I'm like, at the time I requested it, it's like 90 years old. This is the 1920s. Like, I don't think I have to tell you that every single person is long gone. You're not solving this case. And they were like, that's our policy. It's not solved, not releasing it. And I said, well, what the And I wasn't okay with that. Now I'm old and I don't fight very much anymore. I'm like, if you don't want to give it to me, whatever. I'm not going to fight you. But then I was salty. And I'm like, this is not okay. So I asked them, I said, what's the appeal process? And they told me. And so I appealed. And in Illinois, it's very weird. Because in Wisconsin, when you appeal, it just goes to the county. The county handles it, and the county attorney is usually pretty cool about it. But in Illinois, it goes directly to the attorney general. Like, it goes right to the state right away.
Wow.
And so it went to some guy in the attorney general's office, and he looks at it, and he calls me, like, he personally calls me, like, while he's looking this over. And he goes, I'm with you on this. He's like, this is ludicrous. He's like, my job is to, like, kind of be supportive of our state agencies and whatever. He goes, but I have no idea where they're coming from on this. And so he makes his decision. He sends it back to them, and he says, you got to release this file. He goes, you have no justification whatsoever for hiding this file. So they're like, okay. But they don't. They then say, we're going to release it, but we're going to release it with a couple things redacted. And I had no say in the matter. This was between them. And I guess the guy was like, yeah, fine, whatever. As long as you're releasing it, I don't care.
They redacted everything.
They did not.
Okay.
They did not. They sent it to me, and most of it was there. And these files are very short. I mean, for the 1920s, most of this probably has been thrown out by now. So the files are not big files. But the weirdest thing is the stuff that they blanked out was like the address where the murder occurred, where a crime occurred, blank square. And I'm like, why was that the thing that you blanked out? Because first of all, I can read the newspaper, and the newspaper tells me exactly where this crime happened. Like, this is not a secret. Then second of all, I'm like, this is 100 years ago. For all I know, these Chicago streets don't even exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, Chicago's been rebuilt how many times? Is this even a real address? But that was like, I don't remember what else they blanked up, but that was the one that really caught my attention. I was like, really? You're going to fight me on the address?
It's so weird. And the way this whole process works is just bizarre to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there any other agencies that we didn't really touch on that you want to go into before we kind of wrap this one up?
No, not really. Everybody else is kind of somewhere in the middle. No one's as bad as the IRS, and no one is as good as Wisconsin State Historical Society, but everyone else is kind of in the middle. I don't really have a complaint, or I don't have a special, like, congratulations for anyone else. They do their job. You file a request, and they'll get it to you. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not. And usually it is quick. The FBI is bogged down all to hell, but a lot of the other agencies aren't that bogged down. So you'll get a turnaround faster than you might expect.
What is the average turnaround on, like, an FBI file?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, is it months at sometimes?
If it's quick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
When I first started out, things would turn around between like 1 and 6 months. And now I would say 6 months is like fast. This is the reality. I have some things that I requested that have been sitting in the queue for over 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to make your research so hard.
Sometimes.
So
Yeah,
I mean,
sometimes.
when you got to be thinking a year ahead in advance, like, okay, I'm going to write this book in a year. So now I got to request all the FBI documents so I have them by the time I read them.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy.
No, and that is that if I was in that situation, that would be really bad. I'm lucky in that I did so much requesting early on that there's some things that I'm not, if I request it, I'm not going to get by the time that I want to use them. And it's going to happen. But I requested so many things 10 years ago that I have most of the stuff that I'm going to need for the next little while.
Interesting.
But I used to be like, if I know it exists, I want it. So I was crazy about requesting.
So you just started requesting everything.
Well, Eric, I heard a rumor that you don't follow my author page on Facebook.
Well, that's probably true. I don't know how to use Facebook.
Sure.
So.
Well, if you had, we actually ran a contest recently, which was guess how many people I've requested FBI files, how many successfully, I should say, how many I've actually gotten back. And I have FBI files on 289 people.
Wow.
So I have plenty of documents. Like, if I'm going to be waiting in a queue, like, it's fine. I've got enough stuff.
to look.
Yeah.
So, and I'm guessing half this stuff you've never even looked at this point.
I skim. When they first arrive, I always skim them like the first day or two later. But yeah, then they sit in a folder until I get around to taking all my notes. So that's the thing. It's okay that I'm slowed down on requesting because I'm very backlogged on taking my notes.
Cool. But the one last question I want to ask is, have you ever worked with another historical society in another state? Or, I don't know, is there like regional historical societies?
There's regional historical, there's state historical. I mean, every place has a historical society. Sure.
So I'm assuming you've worked with like a regional one then.
Sure.
Do you feel like they're as good as like the Wisconsin one is, or is it varying again?
It varies. It really all depends who the person running it is.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Because I just feel like a historical society is all about getting the information out there.
Yeah.
So they should all be by hands down.
So for people who don't know, my day job, I'm not writing books every day. My day job is I do work at a local library and I do oversee the history collection at the library that I work at. I'm like the guy. I'm like the historical society guy for where I work. And it's different with me there than if I wasn't there. And it's not that I'm more lenient than other people, even though I probably am. It's in how well do the people know what they have and what you can get. Because if you show up and you're saying, I'm looking for A, B, and C, you got two problems. One, the person has to know what A, B, and C is. But then second, how much access do they want to give you? And so, like, if you come to me, I don't know everything we have. I know most of what we have, so I'm pretty good about that. But that'll vary in every single place. Every different city, county, whatever different place, has their own archive. It all depends on who the person is who's in charge of that.
There could be a guy in some office in, I don't know, Beloit.
Yeah.
That doesn't let anything out the door.
And that's very true. I don't know about Beloit, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this historical person
Beloit.
in Beloit, I picked on you and you're probably a great person.
Sorry, Jim in Beloit. I don't know who's in Beloit, but
my point is that literally, like, there could be a historical society that's never let out a single piece of document because the person just says, no, we're not going to let you have that. And
it's certainly possible.
And that's not the way that I think that's supposed to work.
I agree. And yeah, it could vary.
But at least in your experience, they're all pretty good.
More often than not, I've had positive experiences. Yeah.
So good. All right. Well, I think we will wrap up this very long Patreon.
Very long Patreon. Yes.
Our new podcast editor is going to be very upset at us for this amount of work we just dumped on her.
Oops.
So, but sorry. And
I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. Open records is one of my favorite topics, so I'm not sorry at all. Hopefully that somebody learned something and can use this and they're not just completely bored. I love open records. I could talk about that all day. So.
I think that was a very, very good episode. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll be back in 2 weeks with another Patreon.
And we'll be back in 1 week with a regular episode.
So that's it?
Yeah, that's it. So, I'd give you contact information, but if you're a Patreon member, you probably already know.
Yeah, and if you don't, just Google Milwaukee Mafia. You'll find it. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week and the week after. Thanks again for everybody's support, and yeah, bye.
Thanks.
Hey there, Milwaukee Mafia listeners. Thanks for tuning into the bonus episode from our Patreon archive. If you want to hear the latest and greatest content, head over to Patreon.com/Milwaukee Mafia to join the Patreon today. Catch you on the other side.